Hey, I just wanted to connect for a minute with a few thoughts and a few happenings. So, first, some happenings around Saddleback. There's not a whole lot to mention right now. We're going to continue on with our virtual live Sunday mornings. And if you can make it Sunday morning to the live environment, that's awesome. If you can't, you can find it after the fact on YouTube. You can find that by going to our website first, saddlebackchurch.ca, and you'll find some links there. But if you can make the live time, it's been good. It's not as good as actually being together, but it's been good to fill that gap right now. And I'm trusting that this week is going to be even better. So I encourage you to try to make that live event and join up with us. Other than that, we also have our Abide discipleship groups. And so I just need to mention to those groups, check out the email that was sent today. It has the material that we're going to be using and that you need to start going through every day right now, so that when we meet next week, we can discuss lesson 1 in full. And so start on that Abide material that was sent today. The original version is what I called it. And so I look forward to getting together next week and discussing that. And I know it's we're all just going to be just experiencing God in our lives so much. So that's awesome. Look forward to that. That's all we really have for happenings at this time to report. I just want to share a couple of thoughts as well. See, a friend of mine made a few comments regarding our current COVID situation, and one of them in particular grabbed my attention. And he said this. He said, basically, how there seems to be this feeling out there right now, that this kind of sense that we should treat every stranger as though they were a secret killer that might kill our loved ones. And then he said, I refuse to participate in any action that promotes a world of fear and hate. Now, I thought, that really could have been a highly insensitive thing to put out there at this time in light of that tragic mass shooting over in Nova Scotia. I'm sure you've heard about that. And it definitely would not have been appropriate, but he actually posted this just before, like probably hours before that hit the news. And so really, if anything, it was the two of those combined at the same time that really made it stand out. And I don't want to diminish or take away at all from the terrible tragedy and sadness or an outcry of that event. But again, it highlighted this thought even a bit more for me. Are we beginning to do this? Are we beginning to participate in such a way that it's promoting fear and promoting hate around us? Like, I don't think you and I are walking around in hate. Yet, have you noticed how much things have changed? Of course, you've noticed how much everything's changed. But have you noticed even in this area? Right, there is this general sense when you walk around. I go to town and it just feels like there's this general suspicion and fear. And it's not even actually as bad here in our small village, right? We have a lot less strangers. We know a lot more of the people around us. And yet even here, it's tangible. It seems like there's this new wall between people that didn't used to be there. And I have to wonder, like, how long of this before it changes us? Before the fabric of society, as they say, is changed, and our fundamental ways of thinking and interacting and viewing each other, right? And I don't want this change. I don't want my outlook to become one of fear and suspicion of those around me. And so maybe it's not that we're hating, but is fear bringing us to walk around in unlovingness? Right? I mean, I'm not the best at that at the best of times. I'm not great at this. I'm task oriented. I'm usually more focused on the task I'm doing than on the people around me. I have to admit that. But as ambassadors of God's love, we need to be people who walk in love. Galatians 5:22 says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. 1 Corinthians 13:4-5 says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not dishonor. It does not look to self-interest. And I noticed how key in both of those are love and kindness, and how linked they are, right? Love is kindness, it even says. And then there's from our current reading this week, Colossians chapter 3. Colossians 3 verse 12. It says, therefore as God's people, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. So there's love, kindness, compassion, not taking honor away from people, but not looking out for self, but looking for them. Right? And I know that every one of us would benefit from spending more time dwelling on these thoughts, dwelling on these verses, meditating on what this might look like in our lives all the time, and particularly in our current. I thought about this, and I thought it's also this interesting connection in all of this. 1 chapter 4, verse 18. How it says love and fear don't coexist. Right? They don't go together. And yes, of course, we can come up with scenarios where we can say, yeah, see, they do coexist, but that's not the point here. It's when I'm in a fairly typical situation, when I'm walking down the street and I'm going to cross paths with a stranger. Is it fear or is it love that wins the battle in my mind? Right? So we can say we're not walking in hate. I don't hate that person. But maybe the better question is, am I walking in love or in fear? Right? Is there an absence of love in my mind and my thoughts and my actions? Is there more of a prevalence of looking out for self? See, I think this whole environment we're in right now, it started out good. It started out in love. It started out thinking, I don't want to bring sickness to other people. I don't want to bring this around and be someone who spreads it. But I think it's morphed a bit. I think it's changed the general sense and the feeling. There's this tangible feeling out there that it's now more of this protect myself, protect my loved ones. So you go away. Can we as followers of Jesus, those who know the magnificent love of God that pushes through these kind of feelings, can we be the ones who do not follow that wind of change, but who show kindness and compassion and love at all times? This all brought to mind as well from Matthew 8, when Jesus is approached by a leper. And the leper asks, can you heal me? And Jesus, it says he reached out his hand and touched him and said, be clean. I am willing, be clean. See, leprosy, of course, was an infectious disease. And the law of the land was physical distancing. The law of the land said if you had this disease, you had to self-isolate. You had to tell people. You had to say, I'm unclean, and you had to stay as far away from them as you could. Right? It's actually very similar. And I read this and I think, you know what? Jesus could have skipped the middle part of that verse. He could have skipped out that reaching out his hand and touching. He did it many times. He just said a word and someone was healed. See, and by touching this man, he would have been crossing that physical distancing line, and by Jewish law, he would have been considered unclean for a time. It would have impacted his life. He would have had to go into self-isolation. And yet he doesn't let this stop him from reaching out and meeting the man's deeper need. Now, I'm not saying in any way that we should ignore the physical distancing. I'm not saying that. I loved the meme I found. It said, trust God and wash your hands. Right? Like, we still need to follow these things. We still need to be wise. But the point was that Jesus looked beyond that, and he saw in love and compassion, and so he reached out and he met this man in his deeper need. He touched the spirit of the man, in a sense. It wasn't Jesus' self-interest that won. It was love for this person. Another story I always remember, it impacted me, was that of Joseph Damien. Joseph Damien, he sought to bring the gospel to plant churches in some of the remote areas around Hawaii. At first I always thought, yeah, sure, I'd love to be a missionary in Hawaii, who wouldn't? But Joseph Damien, that's what he ended up doing. But he ended up going even further. He went to this remote area where no one ever willingly went. See, these islands around Hawaii, there was this one beach, this one place, and it was surrounded by 1,000 feet of cliffs. And the only way in and out was by boat. You could not get there. And so the areas, what they did, this is like 150 years ago, they took everybody with leprosy, and they dropped them off there. Said, you stay here, you're distant from us, and you just survive on your own. Leprosy wasn't cured yet, obviously, at this time. So really it was no different than in Jesus' day. Leprosy had no cure, so they just said, physical distancing, get away from us. And Joseph Damien found out about this, and he said no. And so he went and he moved himself into that area. And he showed love and compassion. He built homes. He took care of needs. He cooked. And every Sunday he would as well bring God's word, and he would preach to them about the love of God for them. And every Sunday he would start that message by saying, my fellow believers. And he just showed them such a love and kindness. Every week he did this for years, until finally one Sunday he came and he started out his message very similar. He started out by saying, my fellow lepers. And Joseph Damien had finally taken leprosy on. He had taken and succumbed to this infectious disease himself. He didn't let self-preservation stop him from walking out the love of God. Now, my friend, his quote said, I refuse to participate in actions that promote a world of fear and hate. And again, in all of this, I'm not saying we should stop or ignore physical distancing. But let's not ignore those around us in the process. Let's live the love of Jesus. And I hope this thought I hope that it encourages you, not discourages you, because that's the point. It's not what's been changing for the wrong, but it's what can we change for the right. And so God bless you. I hope that does maybe speak something into your life this week. And I hope to connect with you and see you on Sunday morning as we again go to Colossians chapter 3 in the Word of God.